So, as you could experience in the previous chapter with the exercise, being able to translate words is not enough for translating text. You will have to analyze different aspects of the text before even starting, and while translating, some variations can appear. Here are a few aspects you need to look at to ensure the quality of the translation. The first step would be understanding the meaning of a text. This means to understand its message, whether it is explicit or implicit. For that purpose, you will have to understand the following. You will have to look at lexical words used in the texts. For example, if you look at the word compte, you were asked to translate in the previous exercise. In this case, in French, this word can have several meanings. It can be used when talking about counting numbers or about a bank account. So you will have to look for hints in the lexical fields of the overall text in order to choose the right word. Then you will have to look at grammatical structures of the text. The grammatical structure is an important hint about what is happening in the text. First, the mood. Le mode used will show the attitude of the writer towards what he or she is writing. For example, the indicative mood refers to a verb form which denotes actions or states that are considered facts. For example, I am writing an example. The imperative mood shows a command. The conditional mood conveys possibility. And the last mood, which is the subjunctive mood, is very uncommon in English, and it's used primarily in subordinate clauses after expressions of desire, doubt, feeling, judgment, possibility, and necessity. In French, it is mostly used when talking about events that somebody wants to happen, hopes will happen, imagines happening. It is also used with impersonal expressions, such as one needs to go to a meeting. Therefore, mood can help the translator to determine the writer's point of view. And if an idea is expressed as an order, a necessity, a probability, a fact, and needs to be translated as such in the receptor language. The third point you need to look at is the cultural context of the text. The culture and history of a country impacts its language itself. Therefore, some proverbs or expressions arise from this context, and it might differ from what you are used to know in your own language. Therefore, you need to be careful to this context when translating. For example, even if English is spoken in both the United Kingdom and the United States, the cultural context is different, and the language evolved in two different ways. Australia and Canada also have their own specificities when it comes to speaking in English. The fourth point you need to look at is which is the communication situation involved. When speaking about the communication situation, we mean the factors that affect the written and oral communication. In your case, translation will be mostly used in a written context. You will have to determine the degree of formality thanks to the vocabulary and the level of education of both the writer and the audience. For example, is any technical vocabulary used? Both factors will give you indications on the level of language. Is it standard, slang, colloquial, jargon, informal, or formal? You will then have to respect the level of language used and use the same level in your translation. Finally, you will have to look at what the writer has emphasized. Several methods can be used by the writer to lay emphasis on some items in the sentences. This process shows which items are important and which ones are less important. Here are a few of the methods that you can observe. The use of the passive tense will make sure that the most important protagonist becomes the subject of the sentence. For example, the claim was filled by the secretary. In the case of inversion, a prepositional or an adverbial phrase can be placed at the beginning of the sentence, followed by the inverted word order. For example, hardly had I finished this task when he called me to ask for help. At no time did I say we would cancel the meeting. See how I emphasized some of the words. This process, indeed, puts an emphasis on the adverb or the preposition. Finally, when you use clef sentences, they can be introduced by words such as it is, what, or do can also be used to put an emphasis on the action. For example, it was Peter who received the parcel. What we need is better communication. I do think that this meeting was useful. See how when I was talking, I put an emphasis on some information. So now let's look at the next chapter in order to discuss different methods, principles, and techniques of translation.